Welcome to Resa. This is a short story set in the world of The Balance, a full-length dystopian novel available from Amazon and Lulu.com. Thanks for listening. Resa, a story from the world of The Balance by Alistair Wilkinson. Part 1. 12 months. What is it? Resa asked. It was a Labrador, a golden retriever, a beautiful dog, young, intelligent, alert. It looked to her with friendly, innocent eyes. It was more than just a dog. It was a picture-perfect companion that would guide her over. "A dog," said her husband. "Happy birthday," he added. He leant forward to kiss her. "It's not every day you turn 5'4". He smiled. Resa stared at her husband. His smile was fixed. It was the same smile he had had since they were married 34 years ago. "You've never changed," she said. Garçon stared at her the way he always stared. He smiled again, glancing down at the dog as if he were waiting for gratitude. The dogs were not supposed to be given as simple gifts. They weren't flowers or chocolate sims. They weren't a platitude. Resa felt an annoyance at her husband. She stared at him, shocked. "What's wrong?" he said. "Nothing," she replied. She couldn't go on. In that moment his quizzical face was the most annoying thing she had seen since she was under. She looked away from him, her eyes falling on the Labrador. The dog was nothing more than a tired expression of a milestone on the road of a mundane life, one that was nearly lived. Her eyes snapped up, and she glared at her husband, wanting to shout at him to stop looking at her, to slap his face, to scratch his eyes and let her nails carve into his cheeks. For an instant she could feel his skin pulling beneath her nails, curling and gathering in ragged, bloody strips. Afraid, she stepped back, bumping against the kitchen work surface, the corner of the solid beech top banging painfully against her hip. Again, just for a moment, she felt the sensation clearly, as if she were still an under, and had fallen. In the space of a few seconds, revulsion, anger, fear and pain. She hadn't felt anything like it since she was under, since she was 16, since the day before her 17th birthday. And then she was fine. She straightened, turned to her husband and smiled, the same smile she had used since they were married 34 years ago. The change was as smooth and fast as her 17th birthday when she was joined. "Nothing at all," she said. "So, 54, said Margaret. "What's it like?" "Just the same as 53, Resa lied. Margaret nodded, smiling. Resa started to stare at her smile and shook herself to stop. Margaret noticed her attention and smiled more, her mouth impossibly wide. Resa sipped her coffee to cover her embarrassment. "What's wrong?" said Margaret. "You're red." She nodded at Resa's cheeks. "Nothing. I'm just—" Resa floundered, panicked. Margaret looked concerned, her eyebrows high. Resa took another sip of coffee, sipped again and tipped the cup further and further till she was drinking quickly, almost gulping. "Steady," said Margaret. "You're only allowed one a day. Shame to waste it." She leant forward conspiratorially and whispered, "I hear you can have as many as you like when you go over." She giggled. "Imagine it. As much coffee as you can drink. I should be quite light-headed." People at other tables glanced over at Margaret's outburst. She looked down, giggling once more. Then the counter swept their table, and they both dutifully looked into it, their irises flashing red for an instant as they were counted for the third time since they sat down to drink their coffee. Resa stared at her friend. She was 53 years and 8 months, just 4 months and 1 week behind her. As she looked, she regained control, her face losing its inappropriate colour. She smiled at Margaret. Her friend leaned close again, pleased at Resa's reaction. "I hear that you can eat chocolate all day long, and that milkshakes are as common as water." "I've never been bothered about chocolate, simmed or otherwise," said Resa. "Or milkshakes." Margaret sighed dramatically. "Sometimes I think I'd give my right arm for an extra bar of real chocolate, especially at Christmas." She leant even closer. "One year I stole Casper's. He's never been bothered. He just eats it because it's Christmas. I ran to the shed like an under, chased by the hunters. It was freezing cold." She giggled again at the excitement of the memory. "I sat there for an hour, perched on the lawn-mower, shivering with cold and nerves, with this chocolate bar in my lap, just staring at it. The wrapper was red and black and shiny. It was like it was hypnotising me." "Did you eat it?" "No, of course not, silly," said Margaret, leaning back and waving her hands at Resa. She stage whispered, causing a few more heads to turn. "That would be illegal." Margaret brought herself under control once more as the gentle bleep of the counter reminded her to look into its redness. She turned back to Resa and nodded at the golden retriever sitting at Resa's feet. "How's it going with the dog?" Resa looked down at it. "Fine," she said. He needs a name, said Garson. A dog's not a dog without a name. You've had him a month now, and we still don't know what to call him. His tone was not quite admonishing. Of course it wasn't. Not a cross word in 34 years. Naming it would make all this feel too real, said Resa. Or what? You don't get it. You've got another 6 months. 6 months till what? Till you're 54. He frowned at her, making a show of his confusion, as if it were her that were being obtuse rather than him. You said it was just like being 53, he said, and you know that I was lying. There, she had said it. Garson's face was a picture. Resa almost laughed. Humour. It would be nice to have a bit more of that. Garson had no idea what to say, Resa could see. Suddenly his face was so readable. Had it always been like that, or had she simply never bothered looking? I'm 7 months older than you, she said, so I'm 7 months alone with this crazy countdown. I'm here, he said. Did he say it sadly? Did he say it dejectedly? Did he care at all? Resa suspected that she didn't care for Garson. He had been a solid choice when they were 20. When she was 20, he had been 19 and 5 months. The difference hadn't bothered her so much then. It had been the tens that had made her notice a little more each time. She was the first to be 30, first to be 40, first to be 50. Each birthday had made her look at him differently, like he somehow had it better than her. Now that she was in her 5-4 year, she saw him as he really was. Shallow, uncaring, selfish. Not for another 6 months, she said. Garson's face showed his ignorance, annoying her more. You won't be here for another 6 months. I'm 54 years and 1 month old. Even when you are here, I'll be 54 years and 7 months. She paused at that. 5 months till halfway through the final year. You make it sound terrible, like you're dying or something. You don't die. I don't need another leaflet or another counselling session. I've had enough of those to last me a lifetime. You've always known that you'd go first. What, and get it ready for you? She couldn't keep the sneer from her voice. If Garson was shocked by it, he didn't let it show. Resa tried to remember to when she was still 53, just 5 weeks ago. Would she have noticed? She was sure she would. She'd been more and more sure of that sort of thing since she turned 50. Was Garson the same? Looking at him, his simple, friendly smile, his trusting eyes, she doubted it. The dog had more sense than him. She looked down at the golden retriever. Sense, she said. What? Sense. That's what I want to call it. She looked down at the dog. Her, she corrected herself. Funny name for a dog. She's more than just a dog. Resa reached out to Sense and stroked her head gently. The dog looked up at her, nothing but love and care in her eyes. She's going to help me make sense of all this. Even the support groups were balanced precisely. Resa was convinced that the meetings were a waste of time. 16 5-4s in a red and black wallpapered room once a week. 8 men, 8 women, 8 going over first. 8 already had partners waiting for them, and in those categories an equal gender split. All of them were there to share their hopes, their plans, their dreams. They all seemed so positive to Resa, like they were too good to be true. Looking around the circle of friendly faces, she wanted to believe that they were lying, and that they were just as scared as she was. John, a 5-4 just a fortnight from the final quarter, was telling everybody about his ambitions to work with the power industry. He had always been fascinated, he said, by the mechanisms that created power for their world. I mean, haven't we all wondered what makes our TVs and fridges work? Where does the power come from? I can't wait to find out. He smiled broadly as he leant back in his chair, finished for the evening. It was a question he had asked many times. Sometimes he changed the example to electric cars, computers, mobiles, or floodlights at the Under Games. Whatever he used, he got the same reassuring nods in return. Resa thought, as she always did, that she had no interest whatsoever in where power came from. She did wonder, as she always did, about whether or not anyone had the power to change this. "Thank you, John," said Giselle, the group's leader. She was only 50. Resa hated her. The feeling unsettled her, as it always did, as she tried to swallow the following feelings of guilt and wrongness, but as always she could feel herself gagging. The counter swept the room, scanning each eye in turn. It was done in seconds. Everybody was so used to the process, the counting. "Do we need a counter in here?" said Resa. "I just mean," she continued under quizzical stares, "we have to book in, book out. We can easily be tracked and counted without the counter." "The counters are everywhere, Resa," said Giselle. "I know that. I just mean—" Resa ran out of words. "I don't know what I mean." Giselle smiled kindly. "There's a lot for you to get used to. Now that you're 5-4, you'll find you look at things differently. That's true, said John. I missed a scan the other day. Never made a mistake with the counters in my life. Even as a baby, my mum said I was always good for the counters. I went back to be counted again, of course, he added hastily. Of course you did, John. Giselle smiled indulgently. Now, would anyone else like to share before we move on to this evening's topic? Said Giselle. She looked kindly at Resa, and Resa, returning the kind look, shook her head gently. Giselle smiled and nodded. Okay then, everyone. How are we getting on with our guide dogs? I know that this is not necessarily a subject pertinent to all. She glanced at those without dogs, and nodded comfortingly. But perhaps you would have some advice from partners who have already gone over, so we can certainly all share. There was much nodding around the circle as everyone agreed that it would be a fine discussion. As everyone always agreed, Resa wanted to shout at them all, to wake them up, to shake them, to make them realise this was all an illusion. The thought shocked her. She had never before considered that any of this might not be real, or that it might not need to be real. Just what did happen to people when they went over? Did they all go willingly? She remembered her own mum and dad and Garçon's parents going happily. Each of their 364th days were pleasant experiences. Both their mums had summer birthdays, so they had had garden parties, while her own dad had an autumn birthday and Garçon's spring. They had huddled around a barbecue, savouring the smells and tastes of the extra credits worth of food for the occasion. Each had had their final meals with their families. She looked down at Sense, sitting patiently next to her. There were 9 other dogs in the room. Not everyone wanted a guide to go over with. Some already had people waiting, and passed the contingency to others. Resa hadn't been involved in Sense's arrival. Garçon had procured her, as was tradition. This partner, this saviour, this guide was chosen for her by someone who would expect her to fill the same role. Your guide dogs, Giselle began, are, as you know, a companion to take over with you. They're the only things you can take, and so will be the only thing you know on the other side. It's essential that you bond with the animal. She looked to Resa. Have you thought of a name yet? Sense, said Resa. The rest of the circle looked at her, their faces curious. It just seemed right, she said. She shrugged apologetically. The others immediately smiled, and offered murmurs of congratulations, as if she had had another child. That's a very interesting name, said Giselle. What made you think of it? Resa smiled as she forced a laugh. It just seemed to make sense. The rest of the circle dutifully laughed along, and nodded their heads some more. Giselle began again. Your guides will help through the slight turmoil you will feel when you go over. For some, the transition can be, it can be a little hard. One woman's head snapped up at that. She was at the group for the first time. Her 54th birthday was just the day before. She had taken the seat of a woman who had gone into the 4th quarter room. Turmoil, she said. Giselle smiled warmly at her, nodding her head just slightly. That's right, Del. You'll be going through a big change. It will be difficult at first. We don't want to lie to you. Resa looked from Del to Giselle. The 50-year-old had said exactly the same thing at her first meeting. It was hearing it for the second time that made her question. Who's we? She said. Giselle turned her smile to Resa. We are those who maintain the balance. The whole group looked at her, shocked. She had admitted she was hollow. Resa was dumb, struck silent by the admission. And we are here, Giselle continued, seemingly unaware of the reaction, to make sure that your transition is as smooth as possible after your invaluable contribution to the balance. A talking leaflet. Resa looked back to Del. The new woman was clearly not listening. She had just reached down to her dog and stroked its head absently, forcefully. For those of you that don't have your own guides, said Giselle, you know that they will be waiting for you with your partners when you are over. For those of you that don't have your own guides, said Giselle, you know that they will be waiting for you with your partners once you are over. You're very lucky, because you will have 2 friendly faces waiting for you. She beamed. The 8 without dogs smiled back, some of them unconvincingly, Resa thought. I've heard, Resa began, that we can drink as much coffee as we want when we go over. All eyes turned to Giselle. Resa thought that they looked desperate to have such rumours confirmed. Del looked the most desperate of them all, her eyes pleading to be given some comfort, some compensation. It's true that once you move on from your guests, that the restrictions on your diets are lifted, said Giselle. However, I would caution you to make sure you maintain a balanced diet. Too much caffeine is not good for you, Resa. Not good for your body or for your mind. Is that why we only get 10 to 15 years, said Del. Because we don't live as healthily. Giselle smiled again. Resa, just for an instant, wanted to slap the smile from her face. You'll live as you choose, just like you do now. The only difference will be that you will not be restricted, Giselle said. She noticed that John was nodding his head. Did your wife share that with you before she went over, John? Yes, he replied. She was looking forward to it. She always enjoyed coffee. I used to... He stopped and glanced about the room. You used to what, John? Said Giselle. I don't know if I should say, he replied, laughing and shaking his head. We're all friends here, said Giselle. There's nothing you can say that we won't understand. Well, he said, I used to let her have my caffeine credit. Not every day, he added hastily. Just now and then as a treat. She loves her coffee so much. I used to let her have it at weekends and on her birthday. The rest of the group seemed to fidget uncomfortably. John, noticing, said, It's so hard to treat someone, to make them feel special. You know, when we all feel so okay all the time. Because our guests help us so much. A few nodded cautiously. Resa thought that she had never wanted to make Garçon feel special. My wife was so beautiful, so kind, so intelligent, John continued. She was an electrician. I suppose that's why I've always been curious about where power comes from. She would show me sometimes how she fixed things. She repaired our TV and our light switches. She got permission, of course, he added, looking to Giselle, who nodded in return. She brought light to us all, and I just wanted to give her something special. She always said she wanted to run a coffee shop when she was over. She had heard that shops could be run by individuals. Not like here, I mean. Again, said Giselle, it's true that restrictions on buying and selling are also lifted. Everyone is free to try to make it on their own, or to work for others who are already successful. Your wife could already be running her own cafe, John. She beamed again. Resa looked hard at John. He was a little awkward, but clearly pleased. Counter swept the room again. 16 pairs of eyes looked obediently towards it. For the first time, Resa noticed that Giselle didn't look to it. But she was hollow. She didn't need to be counted. Dell began. I feel like I haven't been making decisions for myself. That now I'm 54, I need to get ready to be different. As my birthday got closer, I was thinking more and more about when I was under, and how I used to think that I was making decisions. I realised just before my 17th birthday that nothing I'd done was about me. It was all about getting ready for my guest, before it was in here. She touched her hand to her head, making the others flinch ever so slightly. Resa leant forward, not affected by the gesture. Dell continued. Before it was in here, I was excited about the joining, same as everyone else, but I still thought that it was my choice. It was, Dell, said Giselle. I'm not so sure, said Dell, shaking her head. I don't remember ever being asked. Well, it's not about whether or not we're asked, said John. It's about doing our bit, for them. Nods around the circle. Resa looked quickly to Giselle. The hollow woman scanned the circle, seemed satisfied, and then turned back to Dell. You will soon fulfil your role, and you will have done it well, and then it will be time for you to take your well-earned rest. That's just it, said Dell. I don't remember being an under as restful. It was a crazy time of indecision and pain and sadness. You must have enjoyed your stage as an under. You all enjoy every stage of your lives, Giselle returned. The imperatives in Giselle's words were suddenly obvious to Resa. Dell said, Playing music too loud, smashing a few windows, or sneaking the odd cigarette and bottle of beer doesn't mean we enjoyed it. The rest of the circle looked uncomfortable at the mention of the under vices. Resa herself had partaken in a few cigarettes, been to 1 or 2 parties where there was alcohol, but it was never a big thing. Not for her, anyway. Garçon claimed that he had never bothered with any of it, that he wanted to keep his body pure for his guest. Now that she remembered her husband's claim, she despised him for it. Another example of how submissive he was, how he only ever did what was expected. Well, thank you, Dell, said Giselle, but we were talking about guide dogs, and I think we should return to that important subject. For the rest of the session, the group were informed of the extensive training that the dogs were given, and how they would live for 10 to 15 years, just the same as their owners would once they were over. The following week, Dell did not return to the group, nor any week after. Thank you for listening. This was the first part of Resa. Make sure that you subscribe so that you get the second part when she only has 6 months to go. And please check the comments section, where there'll be a link where you can download Resa for free, or, if you've heard enough to be satisfied that you want to read The Hollow of the Balance, there'll also be a link for you to download that as well. Thanks again for listening.